Have you been here before? Feel free to grab a notebook back there. The binder, that is for you, and that's got all the handouts in it from this whole week of classes. If you want to keep one of those, just write your name in it and bring it back next time, and we'll put, if you come back tomorrow, we'll give you more handouts for it. Right now, we are on the 4th tab in your binder, and we're looking at page 4. We just covered the first 3 pages just now. So, a lot of people ask, well, what kind of herb tea would you recommend for cold or hot foot bath, or what kind of things would you recommend? If you actually go to page 6, real quick, before we look at page 5. No, sorry, excuse me, page 5, not page 6. Page 5 and 6. My pages got mixed up. Page 5 and 6. I have 2 pages here that I've given you of common herbs that you can get at almost any health food store, and what are just a few of their common uses. This is not an exhaustive list of herbs, nor is it an exhaustive list of uses for each herb. It's just a couple general uses. But you will see some of them, I like to use the leaf, some of them are root, and some of them are seed, and one of them is a bark. And each one will say, you can use it internally as a tea, or you can use externally as a poultice. Some of them say, use for lower fever, relaxation, build immune system, aid in internal healing. Any of those fight colds, any of those are good for a sickness. I don't recommend mixing all of them in 1 cup of tea, okay? God gave us variety for a reason, just like He gave us a variety of fruits and vegetables. And so He doesn't want us to just, say, I'm just going to use one forever because it works, or I'm going to use all of them in 1 cup. He gave us variety so we can use different ones at different times. And of course, some of these may not be as available to you, and that's why there's a long list. If there's only, 2 or 3 or 4 that you can get access to, then use those. But this just gives you a little bit of an idea. Most of these you can buy either as a bulk herb with the actual leaf or bark or root, or you can buy as already made tea bags if it's one that says to use for tea, or you can buy them as capsules and take them the expensive and easy way. Or you can get them as tinctures and get them as drops, yes. So there's many ways that you can use these herbs. My favorite is to use either as a tea or a poultice and use the bulk herb. And the reason why is because it's the most economical.
What about the most effective? Do you think that's the tincture? Or?
There is so much information, pros and cons. I like to use the tea because I know it's not a tincture and alcohol or anything like that. Yeah, that's the other thing. Well, most of your tinctures are, well, I should say all tinctures are either alcohol or glycerin. Those are the 2 ways they get the tincture out. Whereas a tea is something you can make fresh and use immediately. You don't have to worry about it fermenting or anything like that. And so I prefer the tea. Yeah. It's also cheaper, by far. The least expensive way is to get the actual herb and make your own.
Except if it tastes terrible. If
it tastes terrible, the tincture will taste worse.
Because, yeah, but at least you don't have to drink a whole cup of it.
Well, it's true. If it tastes slightly bad, then I mix it with peppermint. The peppermint leaf will mask most of your subtly bad flavors. If it's really bad, well, maybe you weren't supposed to drink a lot of it. Yeah. That's pretty much how I go by. I do know that out of this whole list I gave you, there's only one of them that tastes really bad, and that is chaparral leaf. And that one I recommend to use externally only. You can use internally, but only with caution, so it's easier to just say use externally. And so, honestly, the rest of them on this list don't taste bad. But if you don't like the flavor, add peppermint. Make it real easy. So anyway, and some of them will say use as a poultice. Some of them will say use as a tea, etc. So if you go back to page 4, the previous page, I actually have a few recipes for you. The first one on page 4 is cold season tea. Now, it's not something that you're going to want to drink every single day, but it's a serious tea that tastes really good, that will knock out a cold in a very short order. And so that is something that I really like to use, especially if I'm working with someone in the community who says, oh, I don't like herbs, I don't like tea, whatever. I'll say, well, you'll like this, guaranteed. And they'll be like, ew, they watch me make it at their house, and they're like, how can that possibly taste good? You're not putting anything good in it. It doesn't even smell good. And then it's done making. I pour it into the cup and let them drink, and they taste a sip, and they said, did you put sugar in this? I say, no, there's no sugar in it. Oh, it tastes really good. And then they're hooked. But that's what I want. So that's my cold season tea. I've used that for children who refuse to drink water because it tastes good. And I've used it for people who are sick, who are used to drinking 1 cup of water a day, and I tell them they have to drink a quart of this a day, and that's better than nothing. But the way it is, it actually makes 7 quarts of tea. So it's actually a family-sized amount of tea. And the rule at my house is if one person in the family is sick, everybody drinks the tea because we don't want anybody else to get sick. And so I will make 7 quarts. And as long as you use them within a week, it's okay. Just keep them refrigerated. So what I do is I take a kettle, a little smaller than this one, and I put a ½ cup of dried potty arco, inner bark, into the bottom of the pot, and 3 to 4 tablespoons of licorice root, and about 2 quarts of water. I bring that to a boil, and I let it simmer for 10 minutes, because bark and root, you have to simmer. It's not like the leaf. That's what it says. Simmer with lid on for 10 minutes. Then turn off burner and add a ½ cup of dried nettle leaves and a ½ cup of dried peppermint leaves. So you can imagine this tastes really good because you've got peppermint and licorice root. The licorice root is a natural sweet flavor, even though it's not sugared, and of course peppermint has a nice flavor. And so, yeah, the flavor of this tea is amazing. But you leave that burner off and you put the lid on the kettle and just let it sit for 10 more minutes. And then you pour that, that's only 2 quarts, right? You pour that into the bottom of 7 1-quart jars, or if you have 2-quart jars, you can do less. And then fill the rest with water. And just put it right in the fridge. And whenever you want tea, you open one of those jars and pour it into a tea kettle and just warm it up. And you have instant tea. And you can use that all week. It'll keep for a week, as long as those jars are sealed and stay in the fridge. And so that's my cold season tea. It's not something you want to drink all the time, but it's something that really, really helps during the cold season. The next recipe is just plain herbal tea. How to make any kind of herbal tea. And so you can see I've got 1 cup of water boiling in a small kettle, and you add 1 teaspoon of dried herb. So it's 1 teaspoon to 1 cup. If you want to do 2 cups, 2 teaspoons. Now that is fairly diluted, but that's safe for a medicinal herb. If you want to add flavor to that, I add 1 teaspoon of peppermint leaves to that without increasing the water. And that will add the nice flavor to your herb. To me, most herbs taste like grass. And I don't like drinking grass tea, and so I find if I add that 1 teaspoon of peppermint leaf to it, it makes a really nice flavored tea. It's like peppermint flavored grass. And what it tastes like. But anyway, sometimes the only way, I try to get all my tea herbs as leaves, because that's the easiest to strain out, because they're big pieces. But sometimes you can only find powder. You can still make the tea out of powder. You just steep it for a less amount of time. It says for powder, steep 15 minutes. For the leaves, you want to steep 15 to 30 minutes. And for barks, roots, and seeds, you want to simmer on low boil for 20 minutes, except potty arco. Potty arco, it says simmer 10 minutes, and then let sit for 10 minutes. I don't know why that is, but I do know from experience, if you simmer it for 20 minutes, it tastes awful. It gets so strong that it's worse than medicine. So anyway, that's just a simple recipe on how to make any kind of tea. If you want easy, without having to strain it off afterwards, you can buy those little tea balls, and you can stick the herb in it, and stick that tea ball in your cup, and then just dump the leaves out of the tea ball and reuse it. And it's not much more work than if you used a tea bag, but it's a quarter the cost. Buy the tea ball for $1.50 and use it for a year, and just get the raw herbs, and you won't have to worry about buying the expensive tea bags. But tea bags work too. One tea bag has about 1 teaspoon of herb, and so it's pretty much the same as if you used your own herbs, just not quite as fresh sometimes. So any questions on that so far? All right.
Do you use any particular type of water when you make your tea?
You're boiling it, so
it,
no, I'm not real worried about it. As long as I know it's not contaminated, it's okay. Okay, for herbal poultices, this is something that I actually learned a little more recently, probably in the last 10 years, I suppose, when I was younger. But herbal poultices have always been a challenge for me. It's like, you're supposed to take these leaves and steep them in a certain amount of water, and then put it on a, whatever, a sore or wound or whatever you're trying to use the poultice on. And how do you keep it on? It falls apart, it drips everywhere, it makes a mess, and it's just plain nasty. You can't wear it all day long. You pretty much are confined to one spot where there's a waterproof pad underneath something so you're not making a mess. And then I learned about psyllium seed husk. Have you heard about psyllium seed husk? It's something that is actually very, very commonly used in most of your herbal laxatives. It's a natural laxative, but it's also a coagulant naturally. And so what it does when you actually take that psyllium seed husk, like for instance, you take your herbal poultice, right? You can see my recipe here. Take a half a cup of dried herb leaves and set your psyllium seed husk aside. Don't put it in. Cover your herbs with twice as much water, so that'd be about 1 cup of water. Bring it to a boil, shut it off, and let it sit for 20 minutes. Then you've got your poultice made, right? Then you take a couple tablespoons of that psyllium seed husk and stir it really fast, and it turns the thing instantly to a dough. Like literally like a dough. You put it between 2 pieces of saran wrap, and you can roll it out with a rolling pin. And then you cut it with a knife to whatever size you want. Roll up the rest and stick it in the fridge for next use. And take that piece that you cut off and stick it wherever you need to. I just put a tiny piece of saran wrap just the size of the poultice on top so the top part doesn't dry out. And I just wrap it on with a simple ace bandage. No mess, no drips. You can leave it on for 12 hours and it will still be moist. And when you're done, you take it off and there's no mess on your arm. It works amazing. And the neat thing is that psyllium husk is a natural absorbent, just like charcoal is. So in your next recipe, you see the charcoal poultice. If you mix equal amounts of charcoal powder and psyllium seed husk together, you can make that exact same dough out of a charcoal poultice. And there's literally no stain, no mess, and that's amazing.
That's really messy.
So it doesn't stain your skin?
No, it doesn't stain your skin at all. It's amazing. Like, I grew up with charcoal poultices that, if you warm at night, it stained your sheets and your blankets and your pillows and your pajamas and everything else, and you had to use olive oil to get it off your skin and all that. But this, literally, it turns into a dough. You cut it with a knife. You put it on wherever you want it. Wrap it, put that piece of saran wrap on top, wrap it with the ace bandage, and for 12 hours it will stay moist. 12 hours later, you still have a moist, pliable dough that comes right off with literally no residue. It's incredible.
And the psyllium doesn't impact the charcoal's ability to absorb?
Actually, the psyllium absorbs almost as much as charcoal does. So you're really doubling your charcoal's absorbency by that absorbency of the psyllium husk. Plus, the fact it's keeping it moist makes your charcoal absorbent much longer. Because, I used to make it with white flour or wheat flour or something, mix it with that. But after about 3 or 4 hours, it would dry out. And then it would be crumbly, it'd fall to pieces, it'd make a mess in your bed, you're picking out all the pieces of dough, It was just awful. And so when I learned about this, I was like, wow, why didn't anyone tell me about this sooner? So anyway, you can get psyllium husk at any health food store. They sell it in bottles of just the powder, or you can get the bottles of the husk before it's ground to powder. Powder does work better, but they both work. Or you can get it in the little capsules, and of course it's much more expensive. So I buy the bottle of powder. And if your health food store doesn't carry it, they can order it, because it's very, very, very common. Yeah, you can give your health food store a little bit of business that way. So anyway, that's some really, really neat, exciting things that I wanted to share with you about poultices. Now, I wanted to say one thing. You'll notice on page 5, the third one down is chaparral leaf. Have you ever heard of chaparral? It's an herb that used to be claimed to cure cancer. It doesn't cure cancer, but that's what they claimed it to do. Honestly, I don't think any herb by itself could cure cancer, but anyway, I don't recommend it internally because it's an extremely powerful blood purifier, which is a good thing, but if you get too much of it, it will purify so fast that it can hurt your liver. And so you don't want to overload your liver too quickly. So I recommend externally. It still purifies your blood externally, and so use with caution. But I have found it to work amazing for insect and spider bites, specifically brown recluse and black widow. It works like, nothing you've ever seen. I wasn't able to tell this story in the previous class, but a few years ago, I was bit, probably, I guess, within 1 year's time. I was bit 5 times, once by a northwestern hobo spider in Washington, which is Washington State's equivalent to the brown recluse. Once or twice by a brown recluse, and once by what I was pretty sure was a black widow. And the first time I was bit, I was like, okay, charcoal, that's what I knew. I know it works, I'm going to go for that. And so I did, and I put charcoal, and of course with charcoal you're supposed to change it every 15 minutes because there's so much poison to absorb that you got to change it fast. And so I changed it as often as I could, and I used charcoal every few hours for the first 2 days. And I was bit on my neck while I was in the bathtub, actually. And I killed the spider after he bit me, but he bit me twice before I killed him. And by the time 2 days had gone, the swelling was all the way down to here. From here, all the way down my back. And I knew this was pretty serious. And charcoal wasn't working. I was making my charcoal poultices bigger and bigger, and it just wasn't taking it down. And I was desperate. And so I began doing some serious research. Is there anything more powerful than charcoal, And because obviously I was having some allergic reaction to this. And I found one place that mentioned that chaparral helped them with a spider bite that charcoal wasn't working for. It was someplace on the internet. And people were just telling random stories about spider bites. It wasn't even a natural remedy site. Most of them were saying, I went to the emergency room and they gave me this and that, And this one person says, I tried some kind of salve, and one of the main ingredients was chaparral, and listed a few other herbs. And I was like, my mom has chaparral. I was living at home at the time, this is before we married. So my mom has chaparral leaf down in her pantry. I should go try it. And I had just recently learned about psyllium husk for charcoal poultice, and so I thought, well, I wonder if it worked for an herbal poultice. And that was my very first psyllium seed herbal poultice I've ever made. And let me tell you, I made one that went from here to here, you know? I was going to coat this whole thing just on. And I had one big piece of saran wrap to cover the whole thing. And of course, you couldn't use an ace bandage to hold it on. So we had this big kitchen towel that we, pinned with safety pins. And because the pain was so intense, it was just throbbing. I couldn't turn my head at all because the swelling was so bad on my neck. And I thought I was going to die, you know. And so I put that on immediately after I made it. And within 30 minutes, the pain was gone. And I was like, wow, this feels a lot better, you know. And so I left it on there for about 2 hours. Or 3 hours, and then I decided to make a new poultice and change it. And I took off the poultice, and the swelling was only on my head in 2 hours. And so I made a big poultice again, but this time I was able to cut one just that size, you know? And I left that one on overnight, and the next morning it was this size, just 2 little red dots with a little swelling around them. And so I took another piece out of the fridge and put that on. And by the end of the next day, you couldn't even tell. There was just 2 little tiny dots smaller than a mosquito bite. And no pain, no swelling at all. And I was like, wow. So I experimented with 2 more spider bites after that. The first one was 6 months later, and I was traveling, and I had no access to chaparral, only charcoal. And so I changed the charcoal poultice again all night long, and again, by the next morning when the health food store finally opened, I was in agony. And I put that chaparral, bought it at the store, went right back to the place where I was staying, and put that on, and once again, within 30 minutes, the pain was gone, and the swelling was down by half again. And I was like, I can't believe this. I can't believe something exists that really works this well. And so anyway, since then, I've treated a number of other people, and I decided, well, I had a 12-year-old boy get bit. And trying to keep a poultice on a 12-year-old boy is like trying to keep a poultice on a horse. It doesn't work very well, especially since it was on his foot, you know. And trying to keep an active little boy from taking the poultice off their feet, it didn't work. I think he lasted about 10 minutes, and then it was off. And I was like, well, this isn't going to work. So I said, hey, I'm just going to try tea. And so I took a half a cup of herb and put it in like 2 quarts of water and made an herb tea out of it. And I put it in a small basin, put a little more hot water in it, and I said, okay, I want you to sit in this chair, and I'm going to read a story to you for 20 minutes. You hold that foot in that water. And after 20 minutes, the swelling was like down by less than half. And it was just a small little red bump. And so then I just dried his feet off. I didn't rinse it off. I just dried it off and let him go play. And by the end of the day, the swelling had started to come back again just before I went to bed. So before I went to bed, I made him soak for another 20 minutes. I did that for 2 days, 20 minutes twice a day. And I had the same results as I did with the poultice. And so I actually like that better because it's easier than making a poultice. So now I know they both work, the tea and the poultice for that. And I've also used it for infected mosquito bites, tick bites, anything like that, any type of bug bite. You can also use it for fungus infections, and I even used it to treat, not to treat a burn, but to treat an infected burn that had become swollen and fevered and just really bad. And it happened like shortly after I just recovered from a spider bite, and I had leftover poultice, so I just threw it on, and it took that swelling and fever down. Yes?
Do you ever use it for poison ivy?
I've never tried it for poison ivy. So far, I've only used tea tree oil for poison ivy. But it's worth a try, you know. I have no clue, but I'm sure it'd be worth a try because it is a blood purifier, and so it will help clean that out of the bloodstream. Yes?
How long does the poultice, can you keep it in the refrigerator, like?
A week.
A week?
Yeah, it'll last a week.
And you use the charcoal poultice every 15 minutes just for the spider bites?
Mm-hmm. Spider bite or snake bite, either one of those, yes.
But the chaparral is much better if you just start with the chaparral. Don't even
Yeah.
do the chaparral.
Yeah.
Don't even
Yeah,
do
I
Just
would,
start with the
now that you're
chaparral
saying
and just,
that, I would.
you know,
I
you
would
don't even
just-
have to change it, but the first day I usually change it every 3 to 4 hours. And,
But like if you couldn't get chaparral at that
right,
time, you know.
yeah,
just-
charcoal every 15 minutes. Yeah. So anyway, that's one story I wanted to tell you. I'm almost out of time. I have a few more minutes.